Welcome to the Pre to Post Transplant Podcast, a podcast that brings personal stories from transplant survivors, their families, friends, and loved ones. This is where you will hear challenges and triumphs of everyone involved in this journey. Our guests will offer wisdom, advice, and inspiration on everything you want to know about transplant. My name is Jenny McFarland. I am a transplant survivor, and this is a podcast I wish I had before and immediately following my transplant. Thank you for listening. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Pre to Post Transplant Podcast, where you get to tell your side of the story. This is Jenny McFarland, your host, and today's episode is a great episode. It's super informative. First, let me remind you to please leave a rating and review for the podcast. And if you have any questions or comments, or you want to be on the show, then you can send me a message on the website at www.pretoposttx.com. You can also find all the other episodes, their pictures, and a whole bunch of other things on there. So log on and take a look. Also, if you want to reach me, you can reach me on Facebook and Instagram. You can message me there. So today's episode is super interesting. I interviewed a nice lady named Mary Lopp, and she talks about her journey with her little baby needing a heart transplant at just a few weeks old. And this is a great episode. I love this episode because it's so informative and it spreads so much awareness about the fact that organ donation and transplantation is not just for adults, but it's also for teenagers, young adults, small children, and even little tiny babies like Mary's. So take a listen to this episode, and once you get done with this episode, if you could just share it with other people, share it on your social media. That way we can raise more awareness about the fact that even little tiny humans need organ transplants. And if you don't want to share it, then just talk about it. Talk about it with people that you know and say, hey, guess what I learned today? Organ transplantation is not just for adults, but for little babies and small children too. And encourage them to become an organ donor. Let's spread awareness together. Let's teach people about organ donation and tell them what you heard today with Mary's episode. Tell them about babies needing organ transplants and small children and teenagers and young adults and middle-aged adults and older adults. Older adults can get transplant too. So let's just spread awareness together. And so with that, help me welcome my guest, Mary Lopp. Hi, Mary. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thank you.
So you're welcome. So I want to talk about your baby who had a transplant. So first I want to know how old was your baby when she had a transplant, and how long ago was it, and where did you have it?
Yeah, so Bailey had her transplant at 12 weeks old. She was just shy of her 3 months.
Okay.
We had it at Lucille Packard Children's Hospital, so that's Stanford's Children's Hospital.
Okay.
And she had it on October 5th of 2022.
So it's her 1-year anniversary today.
It is, yeah.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, we're excited.
Well, congratulations and happy
Thank
transplant
you.
anniversary to her.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about so what did she have transplanted? I'm assuming a heart, right?
Her heart, yes.
Yes. So what tell me a little bit about what was going on, like what happened, what was she diagnosed with, all of that when it first started.
Okay, well, she's a twin. She was born they were born a little early, but no issues, especially for twins. Probably around 6 weeks old, she started to get sick, but her twin wasn't sick, and our other kids, we have two older kids, and they weren't sick, and she just looked like she had a cold.
Okay.
But I thought it was weird because none of us were sick, so I took her to the ER. They didn't see any issues with her. And then she just progressively got worse, just vomiting, not not tolerating feeds, not waking up very often, not wanting to eat, very lethargic. So we kept taking her back to the ER and they kept telling us she was fine. And then finally, her 8-week appointment with her pediatrician, I said again, like, hey, there's something wrong with Bailey. I don't know what it is, but nobody's listening to me. And so her pediatrician said, okay, let's get an x-ray of her chest because she might have pneumonia.
Okay.
Um, so after that visit, my husband brought her home, the baby's home, and I took Bailey back to the hospital. I mean, it's where the hospital is, but to get her chest x-ray. And then I took her to go get an ultrasound of her hips because she was a breached baby, trying to get all the things done. And then I brought her home. And then I got a phone call from the pediatrician saying that the x-ray found that she had an enlarged heart
Okay.
and that I needed to take her back to the hospital. So I took her back to the hospital and took her to the ER where they did an EKG to confirm the enlarged heart, which they did. They confirmed it, and then they did an echo, which also confirmed it. And then so we have Kaiser, and Kaiser is just not built to take care of pediatric heart transplant or heart patients.
Okay.
So they sent us out to Lucille Packard right away. So we were taken by ambulance down. So it's in Palo Alto. It's about an hour and a half from where we were. So they took her there, and that's where they did an echo immediately and also confirmed that she has an enlarged heart, which they diagnosed her right then and there as with having dilated cardiomyopathy.
Okay. And so having an enlarged heart like that as a baby, is that considered like a more serious thing as if you were an adult and you had that problem? Just because they're little babies, do you know, or
No, I think it's the same from what they were telling us. It just may present differently in somebody so small.
okay,
Because she couldn't tell us like she was out of breath. She couldn't tell,
right.
she couldn't communicate certain things. But I mean, the heart failure was the same as you would experience if you were in heart failure at any age. I don't think, other than the severity of it, which is what required the transplant, but I don't think it had anything to do with her age or her size.
Oh, okay. Okay. And so you took her to the hospital, and then what went on after there? So I'm sure you hadn't heard about having a transplant yet, right? So you were just probably concerned about, how can we fix this? Like what's going on? So what was that like? Like what was that? Like what was going on with like your emotions during that first part of the process when you took her to the hospital?
Yeah, I mean, from what I'm seeing from other people's journeys, I'm part of pediatric transplant groups, and I think our journey was very different in the sense that it went very fast. So
Okay.
so essentially she had been in heart failure for a few weeks before we knew it. So she was already declining pretty quickly. So when we got her there Thursday night, it was like Thursday night at 10. um, Friday morning, they told us that her heart wasn't doing well and that there is a possibility of having to give her an LVAD, which
Okay.
is a device that they put in her heart to help pump the left side. Because, yeah, because she has, because her side of her heart was enlarged, and that's the part that wasn't pumping,
Yep.
which is the most important part that I'm learning is the left side. Um, so Friday they did a bunch of tests to see if she was even to kind of find the cause of the dilated cardiomyopathy, which in their mind they weren't telling us, but in their mind it also lets them know if she's a candidate for a transplant, which I didn't know that that's kind of where they were going.
Hmm.
And then Saturday they sat us down and said we need to have a talk about a possibility of her needing an LVAD and possibly a transplant. So that was pretty fast.
Yeah, that is fast. So what were you thinking whenever they were talking about that? Like, did you know anything about organ transplants already, or was this like a complete shock that this would happen?
Yeah, I didn't know anything other than the preconceived notion that organs are for older people.
Yeah.
The organ transplants are for older people. So I didn't really know anything about it, especially for a baby. I'm all about information, and so I really kind of honed in on, okay, what can I learn about all these things that they're saying to me? What can I learn by the terminology that they're using? So I really put a lot of my focus on learning rather than my emotions. That's kind of how I kept them in check
Okay.
because it was just so much at one
Yeah.
time. And we also still had to be parents to three other kids, also another 8-week-old baby,
Yeah.
right? So we had to really figure out how we're going to function the way we need to as parents to our other kids as well, while also taking in the information, very emotional information for our other baby. So like I said, I just really focused in on the information. I Googled a lot. They gave me a lot of paperwork. They kept saying, we have lots of resources, but we don't want to, give you too much. I'm like, no, just give them all to me, give them all to me. And so I just sat in her room and just read whatever they gave me to
Yeah.
inform me to help us make the best decision. Cause it was ultimately up to us what we wanted to do. If we wanted just to kind of let nature take its course, and see what happened, or if we wanted to let them step in and possibly do an LVAD at that point, and or if we want to go down the route of transplant.
So was it a possibility that it could potentially get better on its own?
At that point on Saturday, no, because they had already started her on heart medication,
Okay.
and it wasn't doing anything. She was continuing to decline, so they already had made the decision that this wasn't going to get better on its own. And we had two choices: one, let them step in and do something, or two, kind of let her just decline naturally.
Oh, yeah, that's probably like a super hard decision. Um, so obviously you let them step in and help you guys. So what was the next step after that Saturday, after you decided, okay, let's do something to help her.
So Saturday was a lot of information, us trying to catch up and figure out what we're gonna do. We definitely thought we had a lot more time to decide on transplant and the LVAD. And then Saturday night, in the middle of the night and early Sunday morning, her heart rate started to go up even though she was sleeping. And so they just watched it. They just continued to watch her heart rate get faster and faster and faster. She got up to 250 beats per minute
Oh, wow.
just
Wow.
sleeping.
Yeah.
And that's when they came in and said, listen, we have to make a decision right now. She's not going to make it. So we either let her continue to not make it or we give her an LVAD. So that Sunday morning, they got the team together. My husband and I had like 2 seconds to decide. We decided on the LVAD and they took her down that morning.
Wow. Wow.
Yes, it was very
So
fast.
how long did it take for them to do the LVAD? Like what was
Um,
that process? Was it a
I want to
long?
say it was about 8 hours, maybe longer. It was all day. They took her in the morning. I can't remember what time, but it's probably like around 8 or 9. It was pretty early. And they kept her until the evening. So
Wow.
we didn't get to see her until the evening on that day. And they don't even allow you in the room when they bring her back because they have to, she's attached to so many machines that they have to get her situated in her room
Hmm.
and stabilized. So it was probably like another hour or 2 hours of them doing that before we could even see her. But I begged them to let me stand in the hallway by her door so I could see them bring her into her room, even though they don't allow parents to do that. I just pretty much said, I'm not leaving. So I stood there. Several people asked me, can you leave? And I said, no, I'm not leaving. So I said, I'm not going to cause a fit. I'm not going to get in your way. I want to see my daughter. So I got to stand there and watch them wheel her into her room. And then I left. Or I left the unit.
And what did that look like whenever she came down, and how did it feel to see her like that?
Um, Leaving her with the anesthesia team was very difficult, but they were very, very supportive and very cognizant that this is a baby, that this isn't someone older, that I'm giving them my baby.
Yeah.
So they were very cognizant of that. That was hard. And then when they brought her back, just unrecognizable.
Yeah.
Lots of people. She was intubated. Never seen that before. Lots of machines. They had her covered so we couldn't see the incision in her chest or anything like that. I didn't even see the actual LVAD until we got into the room that's connected to her, which is pretty big. And the one of the things that the heart transplant doctor told us on Saturday was that because Bailey was so small, there's lots of heart transplant centers that would not do an LVAD on her.
Oh, wow. Wow.
She didn't weigh very much.
Yeah. What did she weigh?
I want to say she was, they do everything in kilos. I want to say she was 5.
Oh, wow.
4, no, she might have been 4. Because she was born at 5 pounds
Yeah.
and she was only 8 weeks old. So I'm trying to convert to kilos.
Yeah.
So I think she was probably about 4 kilos.
Okay. Wow. That is small. So, okay. So they get her all settled and then you're able to go in and be with her. And what was going on? Like what was that like? I'm sure she was just laying there, of course. Is she still intubated that time or did they remove the tube?
No, she actually stayed intubated for over a month.
Oh, wow.
Her lungs needed, like they just kept reminding us that she came in so sick that she needed a lot of support. So yeah, so she was actually intubated for over a month. So yeah, she was intubated, she stayed intubated. We kind of just soaked it in. Again, tried to really focus on knowledge. So I had asked, like, how does the LVAD work? I was looking at the huge tubes in her torso. There's 2 tubes in the torso. One goes into the heart, one comes out of the heart. So you see blood going in and blood going out.
Yeah.
And it goes in this like circular uh, kind of hub where it gets moved around and then it's attached to this humongous generator that they decorated in Finding Nemo. So like that's their attempt of making it seem childlike
Yeah.
or kid friendly. It really wasn't, but it's like this huge machine that it's attached to. So just trying to learn that. And there's a computer on that machine that tells them things. I still don't know what it says. So just trying to learn the technology, trying to understand what the LVAD actually does, because we didn't have a whole lot of time to read all the materials that are out there on it. And then trying to ask, they have all the pumps attached to her with all her medications, and trying to ask, what are these medications? Probably had like 15 pumps connected to her. So like, what are those? So I kind of just focused on that. And then we had a lot of visitors on that day. So lots of, not lots, but our family came up from Southern California. And so we had a lot of that to kind of talk through some things with family and friends. So we weren't really alone too much that day or the next day. So it wasn't a lot of we weren't processing our emotions, I don't think, at that point.
Yeah. So, I'm sure that you probably couldn't hold her and stuff because she was on all that. Um, so what was that like having to go to be with her at the hospital, and then you also have another baby at home that you're trying to take care of? Like, how was that managing that? Because I'm sure you wanted to be in both places at the same time.
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the most difficult parts of this journey was constantly being separated from my kids.
Yeah.
Um, so we had made the decision pretty early on, which we had to, that we wanted to be at the hospital with Bailey, my husband and myself. And how do we do that? We had moved up to Northern California just a few months prior, and we have no family up here, no friends. So our support was in Southern California. So we made the decision to have our 3 kids go down to Southern California to be with our family. So
Yeah.
they did that. They left on Saturday.
Okay.
So we were able just to dedicate all of our attention to Bailey and what was happening and the decisions that we needed to make.
Yeah.
But at the same time, FaceTiming our kids every day and being separated was hard, and it was hard to. We had to come from. Oh my gosh, can't ever say that word. Compartmentalize.
Yeah.
You know, um, so when we talked to the kids, it had to be. We weren't crying. What are you guys doing? We're excited that they get to see their cousins and their grandma and their aunts and uncles, and kind of focusing on really those moments. So a lot of what I was doing, I don't know so much with my husband how he handled it, but a lot of what I was doing is I was just kind of taking each moment as it came, and who do I need to be in this moment?
Yeah.
I need to be a person that needs to learn, the information. I need to be a person that needs to be excited with my kids or happy with my kids.
So how old are the other kids that you have? Or
Our
how old
oldest
were they
is,
at the time?
he was 5. Our daughter was 3, and then the baby.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so I'm sure it's a little bit more difficult for them to understand what's going on because of their age.
Yes.
Okay. So after they so you said a month, so they removed the intubation after a month. What happened after that?
So stuff has happened in between that.
Oh, okay.
So we had to decide were we going to do a transplant once she had the LVAD, and we
Yeah.
said yes, we would do the transplant. Um, then you have to go through a whole process of being vetted, right? They have to vet you. Is this a family that's going to take care of this heart, this new heart? Are they going
Right.
to give this new heart the best chance at a long life? So uh, they do at Stanford, they have transplant committee or transplant meetings on Fridays
Okay.
to decide, are we allowing this patient to have a transplant after you get vetted. So she got the LVAD on Sunday, and I was hoping to get her on the transplant list that next Friday, but we weren't able to. Bailey got sick, and she
Oh,
wasn't doing very well, and they said that we can't put her on the transplant list if she's not doing well.
yeah.
So we needed to wait. And then during that process, during that whole week, we're talking to people from the transplant team. There's like a whole committee team you have to meet. So we're meeting different people. And then that following week, we were able to get her on the transplant list that Friday. So it had almost been 2 weeks.
So let me back up just a little bit, because I thought of a question when you were talking about being vetted. And so I have an experience as an adult going through the pre-evaluation and the talking to financial counselors and talking to social workers and making sure I have a caregiver and all this. So I'm just curious on what you guys had to go through in order to get to being on the list. Like what kinds of things did they interview you with? You said that to make sure that you're going to take care of the heart. So I was just curious, what kinds of evaluation processes that did you guys have to go through?
Well, we definitely had to meet the same people. So social worker, we had to meet psychologists.
Hmm.
So every team member had a different goal, right? But I think it's probably pretty much the same, except we are the caregivers.
Yeah.
So since Bailey's a baby, so it's what are one of the main questions I had first is what support do you have? Because you're gonna need a lot of support during this journey.
Yeah.
What is your financial situation? What is your mental health? I think instead of it being focused on the patient, it was focused on us. That's probably one of the big differences.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, because whenever I remember, and I've talked to a lot of people when I had my evaluation, it's a lot about support. So if you don't have a caregiver as an adult, you don't get a transplant, unfortunately. So I'm sure it's the same um, for babies or children. So yeah, that's why I was curious about that. So you mentioned that she was on the transplant list 2 weeks later. Is that 2 weeks after the LVAD was
Yeah,
placed?
so she had
Yeah.
LVAD on Sunday, and then it was 2 Fridays after, so almost exactly 2 weeks. She was on the list, and they had told us baby hearts are really hard to come by.
Yeah.
I mean, I think for obvious reasons. And then they had said, but what they had told us was a good thing about babies is that they can take any blood type.
Oh,
So
I didn't know that.
we're not restricted to a certain blood type because they don't have antibodies yet.
Oh, okay.
So
Interesting.
uh, they said that opens it up. And then because Bailey's heart was so big that she can take an older baby's heart
Okay.
because her body has already compensated for a bigger heart. So we could do a bigger heart. So it opened the field up, although baby hearts were hard to come by. So they had just told us, like, pretty much get comfortable. It's
Yeah.
going to be a while. Um, we were still in the CVICU at that point because Bailey was still intubated. They did try to extubate her, I think 2 weeks after the LVAD, and they failed. She wasn't able to breathe.
Okay.
So that was traumatic. So they had to re-intubate her. I was in the room the whole time. So that was really hard.
So they
Um,
completely took out they didn't just try to turn it off and see if she could. Oh my.
no, they took it out, and then they watched her, and she wasn't doing well, so they put her on They put her on oxygen, watched her, wasn't doing well. So they just kept escalating the oxygen back up. So then they went to high flow, then they went to CPAP, and then they went to BiPAP.
Yeah.
And the doctor told me if she doesn't do well on BiPAP, our next step is reintubation. So it was all
Yeah.
probably within an hour they gave her to see how she would do, and she just wasn't doing well.
Wow. And so you said you were in the room whenever they re-intubated her?
And extubated, yeah, I was in the room. I was having
Oh,
a really bad day that day. I think it was just one of the days that I couldn't keep my emotions at bay. And so I was just very depressed and I was very upset that they weren't extubating her. I kept asking, extubate, extubate, just for, I couldn't stand seeing her intubated anymore. And then they were weaning her off of some of the sedation meds. And so because she was becoming a little bit more awake, and when she cries, when she's intubated, the sound was just horrible.
oh yeah.
It was just, I would cry every time I heard her cry because it sounds horrible when you're intubated. They have
Yeah.
no sound.
Mm-hmm.
So I just kept asking for extubation, extubation. And so finally when they're like, hey, we're going to extubate today, I was just already so depleted that I was like, whatever, do it. I'm just going to sit in the back of the room and you go ahead and extubate. I mean, it was at a place where I didn't care anymore.
Yeah.
And my husband wasn't with me. He actually left for the first time. He had to go to a doctor's appointment. So I was by myself.
I'm sure that was very difficult, especially being alone and having to go through that.
Yeah, it was definitely difficult. And when she failed extubation, I was just like, whatever. It's just another thing, you know?
Yeah.
But they were able to re-intubate her. The doctor never left, so he was able to re-intubate her pretty quickly. And they came and talked to me, and I was just so upset. And they just, him, because you have an attending, you have a CVICU attending, and then you have a heart failure doctor. So we have both. And so they just came and talked to me, and I just said, you need to call Jonah. I'm not calling Jonah. That's my husband. I'm not telling him.
Yeah.
So they told me they would tell him, and they just said, things happen.
Yeah. So after she was re-intubated, how long did it take to get on the transplant list?
I don't remember the timeline of where the reintubation was with the transplant list. I just know that it was 2 Fridays after her LVAD on September 11th. She was placed on the list.
Okay.
So whatever that Friday was, at some point between that time, they tried to extubate her. I just don't remember the timeline. And then they had to reintubate, and then we were just kind of hanging out. She wasn't doing bad. She just needed more. Her lungs needed more time. Her airway needed more time. So we just kind of hung out. They wouldn't move us to the acute unit until she was extubated. So she had to stay in the CV, which has its own problems just because you're in an ICU, atmosphere for so long, which is not natural. Um,
Yeah.
so we brought our kids back up from SoCal the first week of October because my husband and we couldn't be apart from them anymore. And Bailey was finally getting stable enough
Yeah.
where he felt he could leave. I told him I wasn't leaving her. So the agreement was we'd bring the kids back up and he would take care of them at home
Okay.
and then bring them to visit her. And I would stay at the hospital. So that's what we did. And then I think it was 2 days later, for the first time, I left the hospital. And this is the beginning of October, and I wanted to stay the night at my house with my kids because I haven't been with them in over a month.
Yeah.
And I got a call from the hospital that she had a heart. So she was only on the list for 12 days.
Wow. That's incredible, especially for a
Yeah.
baby.
Yeah. It was very, I was like, see, that's what I get for leaving the hospital.
Yeah. Maybe you should have left sooner. Things would have
Yeah.
happened sooner.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I know. So you got the call. So um I'm sure that was just like an incredibly emotional, happy yet scared feeling at the same time, right? And then you're not even there, so you have to call somebody to come take care of the kids.
Hmm.
So I remember when I got my call, and I was just like, I wasn't even myself. Like I was just like, out of my world, So I can't imagine what it was like for you.
Very surreal. Definitely. You're kind of in the moment, but you're not in the moment.
Yeah, yeah. So what happened? What did you do? just rush to the hospital?
Yeah, I first thing I did was cry. And then my husband was scared. He thought it was a bad call. So I was trying to use my lips to tell him like, hey, she got a heart.
Yeah.
But the heart failure doctor was talking to me, and she was talking to me about all the procedures, and we need to sign paperwork and really the logistical stuff. And I was still stuck in the emotional part. So I
Yeah.
was not listening. And then after I was done crying, I asked her all the questions to the answers she already gave me. So it was a long conversation that it probably wasn't meant to be long because she needed to get back to Bailey. And then my husband called a friend to come and take care of the kids all at the same time. So by the time I got done with the phone call, 5 minutes later, the friend was over. So we were able to leave pretty quickly. But again, it's an hour and a half drive
Oh,
to the hospital from where we live. So I was trying to get there fast.
yeah.
We had to sign paperwork obviously before they could do anything. They were already preparing her. So we just so they have security at the front of a hospital, right?
Yeah.
So the one time security takes forever happens to be this night. And he just I don't know what his deal was, but he couldn't find us in the computer. And I just looked at him and I said, listen, my daughter has a heart. I'm going upstairs. And so I just walked past him and went upstairs. I'm like, I'm not dealing with this. I don't need
Yeah.
a badge. I'm fine. And my husband stayed to get a badge, but I was like, no, I want to see my daughter. So we rushed upstairs, and they were getting stuff ready, and they were bringing teams in to talk to us, the anesthesia team talking to us like, this is pretty sure what you experienced, this is what's going to happen.
Yeah.
The only person we didn't get to meet was the actual surgeon. They said he had to sleep because this was at night.
Yeah.
So we had met him, though. He actually did her LVAD surgery, so we had met him before.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You
We really
definitely want
liked
him to
him.
sleep. Definitely want him.
Yes, I know. That's what they said. They're all, he's sleeping. I said, okay, we'll talk to him after. It's totally
Yeah.
okay.
Okay. So they took her back for surgery. And what was that like? And how long did it take?
I think it's probably similar to the LVAD surgery, probably a little bit longer. I just know they took her at night, so probably around 10 or 11 at night. And then they call you with updates, which is really nice.
Yeah.
And then I don't think I actually have it all on my phone. I should have wrote down the timeline. I want to say it was around 4 in the morning. They said they had the heart.
Yeah.
Um, so they were still procuring it that night because they had to wait to see if we were going to accept it, if the hospital was going to accept it, if we were going to accept it, and all that. So I want to say they prepped her because they also had to take the LVAD out. So I think that's extended the surgery.
Yeah.
Uh, And then I think around 4 was when they actually got the heart on the 5th. So we were called on the 4th of October. She was taken down on the 4th, but she didn't actually get the heart until the early morning of the 5th.
Yeah.
And then we didn't get to see her until I want to say probably like 2 or 3 in the afternoon
Oh, wow.
of the 5th. So they probably had her for a good like 18 hours,
Oh
something
my
like that.
gosh. Yeah. That's a long time. Was she still
Mm.
intubated? Like they weren't able to extubate her before. So she was still intubated.
Yeah, so with babies, they always have to intubate when they put under anesthesia.
No, I mean
So
from before, like, because she had been intubated for a month. She never came off
she never,
before.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
because she was still within that, because she got her LVAD on the 11th of September and got her transplant on the 5th of October. So it was less than a month between those two surgeries. So she had been intubated.
Yeah. So it was 2 or 3 in the afternoon, and then what was it like going in to see her for the first time? What did she look like? What was that whole experience?
We were happy to not see the LVAD, which was nice. Again, her chest was covered. We didn't get to see the incision, so that wasn't scary. Still in the same amount of pumps. She looked better, and I was really shocked because when she came out of the LVAD surgery, she looked so sick.
Hmm.
When she came out of the transplant surgery, she looked so healthy. And I kept saying that, I'm like, why does she look so good? And they said because she's had all this time to heal. And
Yeah.
with the LVAD, it was pumping for her. So
Yeah.
she was able to get stronger. And so she went into the surgery much stronger. So I was actually my husband and I were very happy with the way she looked when she came out.
Yeah. And what were the few days right after the surgery like?
Um, She had some issues the first, they called it LV dysfunction. So her left ventricle wasn't doing well in the new heart after in those first couple days. They said some of it's normal because the heart is stiff because it's been on ice. So you have to, obviously, so you have to get it time to work.
Yeah.
They were a little nervous about that. They had discussed putting her back on an LVAD, which I didn't know you could do with a transplant. I mean,
I
it makes
didn't
sense
either.
that you can, but
Yeah.
so they had discussed putting her back in an LVAD. That was a really bad discussion because I was upset. And then her LV was doing fine, and then she had RV dysfunction. So then her right ventricle wasn't doing well, and they discussed an RVAD. So, and then I was like, oh my, it was within the 48 hours of her surgery, and it was just was not, they were not good conversations to have. And then all of a sudden, her heart started doing what it was supposed to do.
Yeah.
So it was definitely a roller coaster, those first 48 hours.
Yeah. When were they able to extubate her?
I want to say it was only a week later.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So once they did, what was that like? And how long was it before you were able to, pick her up and hold her?
Yeah, I was actually, we were able to hold her while she was intubated and on
Oh.
the LVAD.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Very difficult to do. Um, very, very difficult. It takes like 5 or 6 people to help you. But yeah, I was they're very much pro, like, hey, part of the healing process is are the parents and holding the children. So they encouraged it. So we held her a few times between LVAD and transplant.
Okay.
Um, and we still held her after transplant with intubation. It was actually much easier because we didn't have the LVAD to worry about.
Yeah.
So we held her quite a few times
Yeah.
while, during those times. But once she was extubated, oh my gosh, it was, she still had other things, in her, like, the tubes and stuff,
Yeah.
like to drain the chest tubes and stuff. But oh my goodness, it was like I'm holding a normal baby.
Yeah. And how long was she in the hospital after transplant?
Um, that's a complicated question with a complicated answer. So we didn't get her original discharge didn't happen until January 8th.
Okay. Wow. That's a
We were
long.
in the hospital for a while.
Yeah.
And we were in the CV. We were in the ICU until January 5th. So we were only in the acute unit for like 2 days,
Oh, okay. Okay.
which is again not very traditional.
So how come it took so long? Is that normal? Do you know if that's normal with babies to take longer to recover, or was there something going on?
Yeah, there was something else going on. No, they try to get, which blows my mind, they get the babies out of the ICU within like a week after transplant.
Okay.
They move them out pretty fast. No, Bailey was mainly in the ICU because she was having habituation issues with her drugs.
Okay.
So because Bailey had never had a break from these drugs in between LVAD and transplant, she became habituated. So that was like the downside for getting the heart so fast. Her body never had a chance to get off of the sedation meds.
Oh, okay.
So we had a very, very, very tough time getting her off of those medications. I think that's a whole other story about withdrawals and how they wean babies and the role of the parents and all of that.
Yeah. Was that the only issues that she had? Or were there other like complications with the heart?
All of her complications, even to this day, have nothing to do with the heart.
Yeah, that's
Her
usually how
heart
it
has
goes.
been great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if that's typical of babies or children or just any, you know, transplant recipient. I have no idea. She's had so many. She has airway issues. She has GI issues. She has a G tube. She gets nebulizing treatments for those airway issues. She had a supraglottoplasty procedure done to cut an airway, to cut some floppiness in her airway. Um, yeah, that baby's been through a lot. She's had IV infiltrations. So she has a burn on her foot.
Oh,
She has a port placement because they used all of her veins. had no access.
Hmm.
So they gave her an EJ, so in her neck, and that was the last place that they had. So they inserted a port so she gets all her labs done through the port.
Yeah. I had a port for a long time, long time,
Oh yeah, okay.
but that was before transplant. So, you finally get to take her home, right? And so, what's it been like since she's been home?
So we actually didn't get to take her home. So and I don't know if it's the same
Oh,
for adults, but part of the requirements you have to stay
oh, yeah,
within
yeah, yeah. That's what
certain
I mean. You got
mileage.
to take her out of
Okay.
the hospital. Yeah,
Oh yeah.
yeah. That's
So
that's
we
for everybody. Everybody has to stay near. So, go ahead.
Okay. So hers was a little different because she had been in the hospital so long. So they normally require 2 to 3 months, but I argued that she had spent that time in the hospital. So
Mhm.
the goal was 4 weeks
Okay.
to be by the hospital. But she was only out of the hospital for 4 days.
Oh,
So she was discharged on January 8th and was readmitted January 12th.
what happened?
Her potassium levels were very, very high.
Okay.
Um, and so they readmitted her and diagnosed her with RTA type 4, so hyperkalemia. So then they had to figure out how they were going to treat it. And then they started treating it. And then she just started breaking out in rashes. And then she had an anaphylactic response and she was rushed to the ICU. We were there for a while. They thought it was rejection of the heart. They were trying to figure out why. Um, so she was in the ICU for a while. And then went back to lots of things were happening. They didn't have access to her. So when she had the anaphylactic reaction, they had no veins. So that's when they did the EJ as a last ditch effort, or they were going to have to drill into her shin. Um, so we were working on lots of things. She had to get a port. We had to figure out how to deal with the hyperkalemia, which we ended up just doing a diuretic. Um, and then she also had no, she had her. I'm trying to think. She also had a third thing done. I think she had scopes done. She always gets scopes. So she was in the hospital for that stay for a month. So it was exactly a month. She came out the day before Super Bowl.
Oh, wow. Wow. So you have to go through all this before transplant. Now you're having all these issues after transplant.
Mm.
Um, was it, were you nervous at all that, all these extra complications were, something that wasn't going to be able to be corrected? Or was it just one of those, well, she's doing so much better, she's just having these little setbacks?
I think it's probably a combination. They always the heart, the heart doctors crack me up because their focus is the heart, right? So their way of making you feel better about all these setbacks is to say, well, the heart's good.
Yeah.
And I would say, yeah, but we're still in the hospital.
Yeah.
Yeah, the heart's good, but other parts of our body are not. I was like, okay, that doesn't console me at all. So it was hard to see a life outside of the hospital at that point
Yeah.
because they couldn't predict, right? They couldn't predict these things happening. And then when they did happen, they just kept saying Bailey's being Bailey. Like, oh, anything can happen with Bailey. It was kind of like the running joke. She's the boss is what they kept saying because they would treat things and then she wouldn't like the way they treated it and then they would treat it another way and then something else would come up and it was just a domino effect
Yeah.
with things and then that would make us stay at the hospital longer. And so I really was trying to prepare myself mentally that this was just going to be life with Bailey.
Yeah. Well, was there a time that all of that kind of stopped and slowed down and you were able to kind of just focus on, living your normal life that's not really that normal anymore, but still better than in and out of the hospital?
Yeah, the new normal.
Yeah.
We finally moved back home in March after a stay at the hospital. She had been in and out of the hospital every month. And we came home in March. I told them I'm going home. I said, I don't care what you say, I'm going home. We're going to be back in the hospital anyways, was kind of my attitude. You're going to see us anyways, so let me
Yeah.
go home. And then she had been in and out of the hospital until August, actually. August was our very first month where she had not been in the hospital. So we are just now trying to get into a routine and a groove of this is the new normal,
Yeah.
and where we can see a life without the hospital. So we've gone all of August and all of September without a hospital admission. So we're still getting used to it. It's kind of weird.
And how is she doing now as as like in the world of a baby? I know she's probably not like running around yet or anything, but like how's she feeling? How's she doing?
Yeah, I think that in the beginning, you're not really thinking about development.
Yeah.
And because you're thinking about survival. I want my baby to survive, right? And now
Yeah.
we're in the stage where now we have to think about development because she's so behind
Yeah.
for lots of reasons. And so she gets lots of help. She gets PT, OT, she gets all the help. And what's really hard for us though is that her twin is a constant reminder of how behind she is.
Yeah.
So that's kind of hard. But at the same time, her twin is helping her develop because she gets to see her do all the things. So Bailey just now, I think last week, she just started sitting up on her own.
Okay.
So we're very proud of that.
Yeah.
She's very excited about sitting up on her own. She's always laying down. So now we're working on her sitting up a little bit better, and then we'll slowly get to crawling and all of those things. And she just started eating by mouth some baby food. She started that 2 weeks ago.
Okay. That's fantastic.
Yeah. So we're really excited. Just a little bit of food a day, but it's that has always been a really big hurdle for her is her airway. So
Yeah. Well, I know it's a little too soon to tell because like literally today's her 1 year anniversary, but it sounds like it's the same for you as it is for a lot of other people which is in their first year after a transplant, they have a lot of hurdles to get over. I had a lot. I know a lot of people who've had a lot. And so I think it's pretty common for transplant for the first year to just kind of overcome these things. Your body's trying to get used to this new organ that's, it doesn't want to. And so it sounds like, the last couple of months you're starting to improve. So hopefully, from here on out, like things are just going to start getting better and all these hurdles are not going to be as often and as frequent as they were before. So, by this time next year, hopefully Bailey is, just thriving and being a toddler and getting on your nerves like every other toddler.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Well, that's a great story. And I I'm so happy that you shared it because so many people with like we talked about with organ donation, they don't realize that it's with your children too and they don't, they just don't see that. I never saw it before I got my transplant. Like
yeah,
babies have organ transplants. That's crazy. And so I think that you guys are doing a great job with Bailey and she's lucky to have two strong parents and a lot of family to support her. And I can feel that maybe, after, the year's over, so things are going to start getting better for you guys and Bailey. So,
yeah. That's the hope is some type of normalcy for her so that she does have a chance to enjoy the heart. That was
yeah,
always my thing is we got to get to a place where she can enjoy the gift. Because what's the point of a gift if you can't enjoy it?
yeah, for sure. One more question I have to ask you that I thought about and I didn't get a chance to ask. So, adults, well, everybody has to take anti-rejection medicine. Um, so how does that work with a baby? How do you give her those medications? Like what kinds of forms do they come in? And do you know if it's like kind of the same stuff that regular adult people have to take?
Um, so I don't know. I'm assuming it's the same medications option, like the same options. But so for Bailey, because she gets everything through G tube,
She too. Okay.
everything has to, so her, she's been on 3 different transplant meds. One right now she's only on one. We're actually doing monotherapy,
Okay.
because she's been so sick all the time. And so I was arguing and fighting for monotherapy for her, which is why she's actually not been in the hospital because she was oversuppressed. Her immune system was oversuppressed. So right now she's on one medication. They come in granules. It's the Prograf.
Yeah.
Uh, so we just mix it with sterile water and then we give it to her through her G tube.
Okay.
And then the other ones were sirolimus and Cellcept.
Okay.
those ones she was on originally, which are all liquid forms, and we just give through the G tube.
Yeah. Okay. That was something I was wondering how she would take that medication.
Yeah, I have no idea that once she starts, once the G tube comes out, I haven't even asked because it's far away, but I have no idea if it's a taste. Like, I mean, like if they have flavored, I don't know how you get kids to, I have no idea.
It seems so difficult, or so much more difficult if it were a baby to try to manage all this stuff, because they don't understand what's going on, and so you have to kind of do everything. So I can't imagine. So I admire you guys' strength, just because going through transplant alone as an adult on yourself is extremely hard, and so having to have it with a child is probably even worse. So
Yeah, I think it's definitely more difficult because I have multiple kids, but it's almost easier because I'm a little bit of a control freak. So I can at least control when she takes her meds, like I'm not dealing with a teenager who doesn't want to take meds yet.
you'll get there.
Yeah, I know. I'll get there. So I'm really appreciating that part, that I'm in control of her medications and her treatments, and it gets done because I make sure it gets done. So
Yeah. Well, I have one more question for you. And that is, if you had a piece of advice for a parent who is getting ready to start this process and having to make these hard decisions with transplant, or, advice on, how to manage all of that, what would it be?
I think the most important thing for a parent is to be an advocate, and you'll hear it over and over again. But being an advocate is so subjective. Me being an advocate may look different when somebody else is an advocate. But what I mean by being an advocate for your child is get all the education, look at all the resources, learn the lingo, learn the language that they use, that the medical team uses, so that you can be, they're not very great at making sure you understand what they say. So taking the initiative to making sure that you can be part of these conversations so that you can make the correct decisions. Being an advocate in the sense that ultimately this is your child and you make the decisions. A lot of times the doctors talk like they make the decisions, but they ultimately don't. Just remembering that you are the gatekeeper to your child, and whatever you need to do to make sure that your child gets the best care and the right decisions are made in regards to that child, or your child, that you do, regardless of, however that looks for you.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. That's fantastic. And I'm so happy that you guys are getting through this and Bailey's doing better. And I hope that, a year from now or so, you can come back on and give us an update on how she's doing.
Yeah, no, that'll be exciting to fast forward a year and talk about all the development and all the milestones she's hit. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on and sharing. And I appreciate you telling us all of your journey. So
thanks for creating a place for it.
You're welcome.
I think it's definitely therapeutic.
Yes. You have a fantastic day, and we'll talk to you soon.
Sounds good.
Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Pre to Post Transplant Podcast. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Facebook. Oh, and if you have not signed up to be an organ donor, please visit www.organdonor.gov and register today. You too can save lives.